unregulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. So I know that we talked about Vivek Murthy's proclamation that we need to start treating gun violence as a public health crisis on yesterday's program. But, I had a great conversation with Ryan Petty. But I wanted to get a second opinion from a doctor, quite honestly. So I reached out to a Dr. Robert Young with Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership, said, hey, can you come on and give me your thoughts on what the Surgeon General has said? Dr. Young could not join us yesterday because he is a doctor in private practice, but he was able to carve out a few minutes today to discuss the Surgeon General's announcement and really just how long this has been coming. I was amazed at some of the quotes that Dr. Young pulled out from the 1990s. That sounded like Vivek Murthy could have made these statements yesterday. Again, this is something that the gun control groups have been pushing for a long time, and they're not going to stop just because Murthy has made this proclamation, because his proclamation is nothing more than that, right? It's words, but there's no actual action to be taken as a result. That's where the gun control groups come in, right? Trying to use Murthy's words to pressure lawmakers to make those changes that he's called for, which just happen to be the same gun control policies that they've been demanding for decades. Anyway, we'll get to that in just one second. Before we do, though, let's talk about this for a moment. Economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise and global uncertainty looming, it's clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. If you haven't had your eye on gold, time to make it a priority. Priority Gold. Trust their team of proven professionals to help you diversify your savings with gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit PriorityGold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic environment. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit PriorityGold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD. And now let's talk with Dr. Robert Young from Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership about Vivek Murthy's proclamation. We need to start treating gun violence as a public health crisis. Maybe start treating guns like they were cigarettes, right? Yeah. Got the good doctor's take on the bad advice from the Surgeon General. Take a look and a listen. Dr. Young, thanks so much for joining me on the program today. It's good to see you again.
I'm very happy to be back with you, Cam.
So the Surgeon General says that we need to start treating gun violence as a public health crisis. So I called on you for a second opinion. What is your take on what Vivek Murthy announced yesterday?
What took him so long? That's the question. When Murthy got his Surgeon General appointment under Obama because he had formed and led Doctors for Obama leading into the 2008 election. I have no idea what impact it had, not a lot probably, but that political engagement I'm sure is what brought him to their attention. And at that point, Doctors for Obama was vehemently anti-gun. So that was another plus, of course, for the next Democratic administration. And then he, at his hearings to confirm, he says he's not going to make guns an issue. Now, if it's his issue, he should make it an issue. That's one of the best bully pulpits in the country when it comes to medical issues. But I guess he wanted to be confirmed. So there's another statement of his politics and his political behavior. And along with Obama, who didn't touch the subject during his first administration, Murthy kept quiet. And now he's back. And he's been Surgeon General now for 3 years, and not a peep out of him about this. And suddenly, when I suspect the Biden campaign is starting to realize it has to pull out all the stops to hopefully get their recliner-bound candidate reelected, it's time to make an issue of this and see if you can stir up the base this way. And so, no question, your interview with Ryan Petty
Yeah.
yesterday made that point, but I thought some of the background was interesting.
Yeah,
Too,
absolutely.
about where Murthy comes from and what really motivates him.
Yeah, yeah, and and again, his denials in the past that he would use his position as Surgeon General to push for gun control, and then yesterday we see that absurd claim of we need to take politics out of this, but also Congress needs to pass all these new gun control laws, right?
Right. Well, if you're going to take politics out of it, he wouldn't have made the announcement he did, and the Democrats wouldn't be pushing it. They'd be looking at the data. And along with Ryan yesterday, I'd love to sit down with people who want to deal with the facts of the matter and who realize that private gun ownership in this country is, according to the data, is 99.9% safe. And a big portion of that, 99.9%, helps us stay safer. Private gun ownership in this country is positive for public safety. That's been the message of Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership for the last 30 years now.
Yeah. Well, and
if you want to start from that presumption, we'll talk.
Right. But that's the thing. They don't want to start from that presumption, and it reminds me of, we were talking with David Yamane, sociology professor at Wake Forest, and he's got this new book, Gun Curious. It kind of describes his evolution into becoming a gun owner and even a super owner. And that was one of the, messages, maybe the primary message that he wanted to get out with his book is that gun ownership is normal and normal people own guns.
Right.
And again, the vast majority, right, we hear about the misuse of firearms. We hear about that small percentage, portion of a fraction of a percent of Americans who misuse firearms in crime. They take their own lives with firearms. But as David says, we don't hear about, because it's not newsworthy, the tens of millions of Americans who are safe and responsible with firearms. No one's covering them. No one's writing stories about them. They're not going to appear on the nightly news. And so you do get this sort of warped perspective. I thought it was really interesting. I don't know if you've seen this, Dr. Young, but the Washington Post's Philip Bump had a piece, I think this was published yesterday, where he talked about the numbers behind the public health crisis. And he put it in quotes, right? And he went through, and you show the state and you can see, state by state, the rise in gun deaths, particularly starting in 2019, 2020 during the pandemic. But he also included, and I thought this was really interesting, he says the recent increase in gun deaths, though, pales in comparison with the surge in overdose deaths.
Oh, my God.
That surge, he says, is attributed to the increase in deaths from fentanyl, but overdose deaths have been increasing for some time before the emergence of fentanyl a few years ago. And you look at this, and in state after state, the number of drug overdose deaths is about twice that of all gun-involved deaths, homicides, suicides, and accidents. I didn't realize this, but apparently back in 2017, drug overdoses was declared a public health crisis, and those numbers just kept going up. So I guess there's a long way of asking the question, what does it matter if Vivek Murthy says that we need to start treating gun violence as a public health crisis? What does that mean in the real world? We supposedly are doing that with illegal drugs, and that didn't bring the numbers down.
Well, it doesn't mean anything. That's what's sad about this too. Murthy can beat any drum he wants, and that's fine. If he has any integrity, he would have been beating this all along. But the biggest healthcare epidemic in this country is the overdose crisis, primarily driven by fentanyl, and now, sadly, even stronger drugs. Half of my work, besides private practice psychiatry, is in a substance abuse clinic in downtown Rochester, New York, which occasionally hits the news as the most murders and a high rate of urban drug dependence and deaths from it. I probably lose one patient a month. This stuff is getting into all drugs being sold. It's getting into marijuana being sold to be smoked. It's killing people right and left. That is an epidemic. guns aren't.
Yeah.
So again, the focus is political. There's no question about it, and completely misconstrued, if not deceptively falsified.
All right. So I want to ask you about this because, and apologies if we're going a little bit far afield, but you say that gun ownership certainly is not a crisis, a public health crisis, and I would agree with that. But when you talk about these drug overdose deaths, as you say, fentanyl we're not just seeing people who are addicted to drugs who are dying from overdoses, right? We're seeing people who aren't even using what we consider to be quote unquote addictive drugs like marijuana or laced with fentanyl. Kids are taking pills. They're buying what they think are, Xanax, and instead it's laced with fentanyl. I just read a story a couple of days ago in Loudoun County, Virginia. I think there have been at least 6 overdoses in the schools, in a high school, in just the past, month or so. So it really is bad.
No surprise. Yeah.
But then you look at that body of people who are addicts, right? The 100,000 plus alcohol related deaths in this country every year. And I look at these things and I'm not the one who came up with this phrase. I don't know who came up with it, but deaths of despair.
Yes,
these people,
a wonderful term. Yes.
And it's the drug overdose deaths. Many of them, it's the alcohol related deaths. Many of them, it's suicide, both gun involved and non-gun involved. To me, if we're going to talk about a crisis in this country, that I think is an underreported crisis. And it's something that we don't want to talk about. Because again, for the Democrats, you can call for gun control, but that doesn't really answer the question, right? It doesn't solve the problem.
Right. 2 points here. Absolutely. And the lockdowns under COVID that took kids out of school created what has become a crisis of mental illness among adolescents and young adults who did not have their normal social networks to support them through that time. And as we know, just from measures of educational achievement, they are way behind. And on average, they may never catch up. It was only the most highly motivated kids who could. But that's incredibly sad, and it's incredibly important. And we don't have nearly enough mental health therapy workers out there to begin with, let alone psychiatrists like myself who treat the hardest, most difficult cases. And we have even fewer, relatively speaking, for kids and adolescents. So this is going to be a long-term problem in our country. And there's no question our culture, now this is the second point, our culture, which focused on social media in the privacy of your bedroom, paying attention to a little screen like this, instead of interacting in person, had already been promoting that sort of social isolation. So we have a huge problem on our hands. I want to deal with the things that matter. Violence matters, absolutely, and violence with any tool matters. The problem there is the Democrats can't really address it because it's their problem. They own it because the highest rates are in the urban areas that have been controlled by Democrat administrations for decades. So they can't even admit it. So we're so far away from being able to address in an objective, healthy fashion any of these problems that I find myself despairing sometimes too. So I just keep doing what I can do for my individual patients who want help with it, and continue to speak up like this, along with you and Ryan and everyone else. David Humane, who indeed learned who gun owners are. They're everyone, and they're all types of people, and they're normal. And keep talking. The message gradually comes across. You can tell that because of the expansion of gun rights state by state by state in this country. There are some hard cases that are going to have to be forced. One is my state of New York.
Yeah, unfortunately. Although, so it's funny that you bring up New York because I wrote a piece yesterday talking about some of the things that Murthy left out? Because again, if you're going to take this public health approach, I tend to look at, okay, we've taken a public health approach to drug overdoses. And one of the things that, we hear all the time when it comes to reducing drug overdoses is harm reduction, right? So that's why we need Narcan everywhere, so that if we see somebody overdosing, we can save their life.
Well, that's not harm reduction.
Okay.
That's treatment. Harm reduction is when you are accepting the fact that they're addicted and you're going to go ahead and try to support that addiction in the safest way possible, rather than leaving them out on the street, digging around for dirty needles and adulterated, God knows what provenance drugs to inject.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for the clarification.
That's where comes things like that's from where come things like needle programs, providing, some of which we do by prescription in our clinic, providing a safe opiate substance that will not kill them and actually can scarcely be overdosed on. But
we also have things like safe injection sites, right, where people can shoot up supervised by medical professionals.
Right. But the problem with all that is that unless you are requiring engagement and treatment, all you're doing is perpetuating the problem.
Okay.
So I draw a bright line between providing care, treatment, medicine, counseling in a health facility like we do, versus quote harm reduction on the streets, where you're really just facilitating people continuing their addiction, albeit more safely, from things like hepatitis and HIV. But you're not doing anything to push them into treatment to try to get over it and get healthy and live normal lives.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
But no. That certainly is something that the left talks about when it comes to drug overdoses, right? But when it comes to gun violence as a public health epidemic, is this abstinence-based approach, right? It's don't talk about a gun, don't touch a gun. And I brought this up yesterday because in New York State, we just had the high school trap shooting championships. Now, this is not a recognized high school sport. This is a club sport. But you had 2,000 high school kids with shotguns show up at this, little tiny town in New York. Everybody was safe. Everybody was responsible. Everybody had a good time. To me, if you're going to treat guns or gun violence as a public health issue, then part of that is allowing kids to learn how to be safe and responsible with a firearm. Again, that harm reduction approach. So guns are here. Guns are always going to be here. You're not going to get rid of guns. You're not going to convince everybody to not own a gun. So at that point, why don't we reduce harm by providing education, by providing that experience, by providing an opportunity to learn how to be safe and responsible with a firearm, to learn the power of a firearm, so that these kids aren't getting all of their messages and their education from social media, or from video games, or from the movies, right?
It's
Why is that approach left on the? Murthy didn't talk about that. Nobody who talks about treating gun violence as a public health issue I've never heard anybody say we actually need to, ensure that kids have a positive relationship or can have a positive relationship with gun owners, and again, knowing how to be safe and responsible with them.
Well, people have heard me say this many times. So there's one.
Okay.
There's one.
But you're not advocating to treat gun violence as a public health issue.
Well, yeah. And you can inoculate people against bad behavior by teaching them what good behavior is, as it were. This is where sex education in the schools came from. At that time, it wasn't so much a disease issue, but trying to help kids avoid having babies while they're 16 years old, 16-year-old cheerleaders in high school. And whatever your position is on sex education, that was the motive. Likewise, I'm a strong advocate for gun education in the schools as part of the standard curriculum. So many places, for example, teach swimming. Our schools routinely teach all kids how to swim. That's important because kids may find themselves in a body of water that's deeper than their nose. And that inoculates them against dying that way. Likewise, teaching kids that guns are dangerous, that as kids, they should not touch them. They should go away. They should call an adult. I think we've heard these recommendations before from the NRA and others. And that will save kids' lives, because the curious ones who have not been taught this will touch them, will not leave, will not call an adult, and sometimes end up picking it up and killing somebody, if not themselves.
Yeah.
So why aren't we caring enough about our children to teach them how to be safe? And later on, as they may be interested, like these 2,000 excellent kids, which is a tiny fraction of the number of New Yorker kids who used to enjoy these sports, go ahead and learn how to become skilled with them and enjoy them in a sporting sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad
we know why. It's politics. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, you're right. Just like with Murphy's proclamation yesterday, right? It all comes back to politics. Dr. Young, thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Oh,
no,
okay. Well, on the subject of Murphy's brilliant new insight that we should treat guns as evil objects that cause illness, let me just take us back to 1994 and a quote from Mark Rosenberg, who was the head of IMH or NIH, and he's still bopping around out there. He was directing his agency to depict firearms as, quote, dirty, deadly, and banned, unquote. The next year, excuse me, I've got some good quotes open on my browser here. Eric Holder, before he was Attorney General in 1995, who was already an activist U.S. Attorney for D.C., used anti-cigarette campaigns as a model for how he thought guns should be handled. Quote, "We need to change the way in which people think about guns, especially young people. Make it something that's not cool, that's not acceptable. It's not hip to carry a gun anymore, just like we changed our attitude about cigarettes," unquote. This attitude that guns should be treated like cigarettes is at the heart of this public health campaign, as if they're the vectors for the problem, as if a gun in itself causes violence. It was absolutely necessary with cigarettes. Cigarettes were way too cool up through the 1960s, because all they do really is give you some oral gratification, maintain a nicotine addiction, and then kill you. And the first two are not worth getting killed by it later. A gun doesn't do anything. So this is a continuum, and this is when DRGO was founded, recognizing this problem very early on. And it's been a continuum ever since.
I was going to say,
treat guns as the issue, but it's not the issue. We need to treat illegal gun ownership by criminals and their use, and we need to treat all of our millions of despairing, often suicidal people who will turn to whatever plan they can find to end their lives if we can't intervene helpfully. That's the public health aspect of this.
Absolutely. And it is amazing how little has changed in the rhetoric from the anti-gunners over the past 30 years. I appreciate you sharing those quotes. And Dr. Young, I really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I'm looking forward to doing this again very, very soon. But again, thank you so much for sitting down with us here on Cam and Company.
Anytime, Cam. My pleasure. Take care.
My thanks again to Dr. Young for joining us on the program today. We will look forward to having him back again here very soon. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking with Cody Wisniewski of the Firearms Policy Coalition about the Rahimi decision. Not necessarily just the decision itself, but again, this 8-1 opinion from the Supreme Court that you can start to stretch these historical analogs out a little bit, right? You don't need to look for that exact twin. What does this mean for Second Amendment challenges going forward. Again, we'll talk about that on tomorrow's Bearing Arms Cam and Company. Before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's discuss this for just 1 second. At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle that we hold sacred, free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed in mainstream narratives, leaving many folks feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Now, they tirelessly seek out financial experts, the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. That's why they've created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. Now, this free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it absolutely free. Just text the word IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, so turning our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, we will start there. Now, I don't know if this is technically a true recidivist report because these might be first offenders, but it still just rankles me, particularly since you've got, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham out there blaming lawful gun owners to this day for the rise in violent crime in New Mexico. And what happens when people are actually charged with violent crimes? Well, all too often they get probation, as in the case of 2 University of New Mexico students who were charged in connection with an attack on, at the time, New Mexico State University basketball player named Mike Peake. Now, Peake, when he was attacked, had a firearm on him. Wasn't supposed to, because this was on campus. New Mexico is not a campus carry state, but authorities ruled that he acted in self-defense when he shot at his attackers. 2 of the individuals, again, who were involved in that attack, sentenced on Tuesday in Albuquerque in front of 2 different Second Judicial District judges, Jonathan Smith and Eli Upshaw, both students at the University of New Mexico, when authorities say they conspired with 2 other students to attack Peake there on the University of New Mexico campus. Upshaw pleaded guilty to felony charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, as well as conspiracy to commit aggravated battery, back in April. He originally had pleaded not guilty in January of last year. He was released from jail to live with his mother in Maryland. He got his sentence yesterday. Again, felony aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit aggravated battery, 4.5 years of supervised probation. Yep. He had faced up to 4.5 years in prison. Prosecutors were seeking at least 3 years of prison for Upshaw, who hit Peake twice with a baseball bat, but instead walked away with probation. Jonathan Smith, meanwhile, also sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation after pleading guilty to felony charges of conspiracy to commit aggravated battery with great bodily harm, as well as tampering with evidence as part of a plea deal. He could have faced 3 years in prison, but instead got 3 years probation. Another individual who's involved, again, there were 4 students involved, right? Maya Hill was 17 at the time of the attack. She admitted to aggravated battery with great bodily harm. She was placed on probation until she turns 21. The 4th student, Brandon Travis, was shot and killed by Peake. Travis had followed Peake with a gun pointed at him after Peake was attacked, again with a baseball bat. That's when Peake drew his own firearm. The 2 began shooting at one another. Police say that Travis fired several times. Peake fired back. Travis was killed in the shootout. Peake was shot in the leg. Peake, again, not charged with a crime for the shooting, which was determined to be self-defense. But all 3 of the individuals who attacked him, all 3, who survived, walked away with probation, not a day behind bars. That is absolutely insane. And again, prosecutors were requesting prison. Guidelines called for prison, but that's not what they got. All right, today's armed citizen story from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Excuse me, a case that does not involve anybody named Rittenhouse. Kenosha police say a tenant defended themselves, and no charges will be filed in the fatal shooting of a 24-year-old man at a Kenosha apartment on Tuesday night. I guess this was early last Friday morning. Police said on Tuesday night that no charges will be filed against the tenant. According to a news release from the Kenosha Police Department, a burglary had been committed earlier in the day at that same apartment. A gun had been stolen by a individual, 24-year-old Izarian Cooper, and a accomplice, 20-year-old Deontay Lee. According to the police there in Kenosha, Cooper then returned to the apartment to get some stuff that he had left behind. When he showed up again, there was a tenant inside the apartment who became involved in a physical struggle with Cooper. Cooper apparently was armed at the time, according to police. Police say the tenant had become the victim of an armed home invasion of his residence and acted in defense of himself. He said, according to the police report, we've worked closely with the Kenosha County DA's office and have collectively concluded that given the information and the facts known at this time, no homicide-related charges will be referred or filed. So there you go. And finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A gentleman in Muskegon, Michigan, who helped their neighbor after a tree fell on her car with her and her 2 kids inside. There were some wicked storms in Muskegon. Boy, we could use some of those here in Central Virginia right now. Alex Castillo, getting ready to go. Well, she was on her way to work. It was about 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. And all of a sudden, she and her 2 kids, ages 2 and 4, are trapped underneath this fallen tree. Thankfully, they were unharmed. I mean, the tree fell on their car. She said it happened so fast. But she said, we have the best neighbors all over this road. She said, I wasn't even out of the car yet. And somebody was screaming, asking if we were okay. Kelly Jacobs was that individual. Jacobs says that she rushed to Castillo's car, pulling him out safely. The kids out safely, nobody hurt. Castillo said the first thing they went for, kids in the car seats, took us into their home, fed my kids breakfast. She said that Jacobs said that as a grandmother herself, she just wanted to make sure that the family was safe. She said they were shivering. I just tried to get their mind off of everything. And they were worried about mom. So I just fed them some food. So there you go. In the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Sorry for misgendering you, Kelly Jacobs. You are not a gentleman, but you are indeed a fine, upstanding citizen there in Muskegon, Michigan. And, listen, did she save lives? Probably not. I mean, again, it looked like the kids were going to be okay. But a freaked out family and a neighbor in need, I mean, that's what good neighbors are for, right? So I'm still chalking this one up to a good deed of the day. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. I am looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. We'll be talking with Cody Wisniewski of the Firearms Policy Coalition. Might even have a special guest tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's going to be tomorrow or Monday, but we'll tell you more about that as we get there. All right, don't forget to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from across the nation. If you like what you see, I would also encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. Just use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, and you can get a significant savings on your membership. You'll get exclusive content not available to non-subscribers. You'll get an ad-free experience, the ability to comment on stories, but you will also be supporting the independent pro-Second Amendment journalism that we do at Bearing Arms, and your support is critically important these days with big tech censorship, mainstream media bias. We've got to get the word out there about our rights, and you can help do that by becoming a VIP or VIP Gold member. So thank you again. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.